Hi mathletes, you need our note sheet for solving by square root method that you see here. I'm going to zoom in to focus on the top half. We're going to do these first three problems together. And the first statement here says, I can only use the square root method when, and that is when there is no x term. See how we have an x squared, no x term. This one has an x squared term, but no x term. This one has an x squared term, no x term. That's what we have to have. And then to solve, we're going to solve just like we do a regular equation. We have to get the variable by itself. We have to get that x term alone. After we do that, we're going to square root both sides. And when we square root both sides, we have to do a plus or minus, just like there's a plus or minus in the quadratic formula. When we have an x squared, we're going to usually have two answers. So let's take a look at this first one. This first one, get the x squared term alone. Well, it is already alone. You can see right here it's just x squared. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to square root both sides. And when I do that square root, I right away put the plus and minus. We're going to simplify, or see if we can simplify the square root of 12. And we do that by making a factor tree or dividing it out into primes. So 12 divided by 2 is 6. 6 is still even, so we can divide by 2 and we get 3. Now we can see that we have a pair. That's 2 squared, and the square root of 2 squared is just 2. And then what's left over is the square root of 3, and I still have my plus or minus. So my answer is plus or minus 2 square root 3. Taking a look at our next example, I don't have just an x squared. I have a 3 out in front, so I need to get rid of 3. That's being multiplied here, so the inverse of multiplication is division. I'm going to divide both sides by 3, so I'm left with x squared is equal to 9. Now I'm at this step where I have the x squared term alone so that I can square root both sides. And I'm going to do that. Don't forget your plus or minus. And hopefully you recognize here that the square root of 9 is a perfect square, so the square root of 9 is 3. So I get x is equal to plus or minus 3. So plus or minus 3 is my answer. And on this last one, you can see that I have x squared, but I have a minus 1 here. And to get rid of a minus 1, its inverse operation is to add 1. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides. I have x squared. This whole thing cancels out, is equal to 24. Now I have my x term alone, so I can square root both sides. Don't forget your plus or minus. And I'm going to think about breaking apart that 24. And you can do that in a factor tree, or you can do it in this division setup. But 24 divided by 2 is 12. That is still even, so I'm going to divide by 2. That gives me 6. 6 is still even, so I'm going to divide by 2 again. That gives me 3. That's prime. I'm ready to stop. And I only have one pair. I have this 2, so this 2, square root of 2 squared is 2. I'm going to pull that on the outside. And then you can see that I have two numbers here that are left over. 2 times 3 is 6. That is what is going inside. You can write it, I'll write it separately first, and then I'll write it together, and don't forget your plus or minus. So my answer here is going to be plus or minus 2 square root 6. And I'll just zoom out here to see the whole assignment. You are going to finish these remaining questions for in class or for homework if you don't finish during class.